When I was 15, I saw an old and beautiful oak struck by lightning at my childhood home in Belrive in the mountains of Jura. I had never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. From that moment on, I was obsessed with harnessing the secrets of the natural world. A few short years later, I arrived at university with eager eyes and my head held high. The time I spent here was the most fascinating and exhilarating years of my life. However, the enthralling nature of my research consumed me entirely and stripped me of everything I once knew and loved.
Hello, Professor. I'm Victor Frankenstein. I'm one of your students.
Nice to meet you.
Meet you.
So, how have your studies into natural philosophy gone this far, Victor?
Very well. Done a lot of reading.
And naturally, you've read the likes of Aristotle,
No,
Galileo,
not quite.
Francis Bacon.
No, but I have read Cornelius Agrippa, read Paracelsus. I've read Albertus Magnus very extensively.
Have you really spent your time in studying such nonsense?
Mm-hmm.
Every minute, every instance that you have wasted on those books is utterly and entirely lost. You have burdened your memory with exploded systems and useless names. Good God. In what desert land have you lived where no one was kind enough to inform you that these fancies which you have so greedily imbibed are 1,000 years old and as musty as they are ancient? I little expected, in this enlightened and scientific age, to find a disciple of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew. Here, these authors will supplement and replace your learning nicely.
Thank you, sir.
I went home that night to contemplate my disastrous meeting with Professor Kremp. He was unable to comprehend the brilliance of my line of research, too entrenched in the conventional philosophers. Philosophy is the field where one has to think and rethink old and new values alike, and if my professor cannot even overcome his partiality, what hope will he have to guide me through my studies? Though perhaps Professor Waldman will be more perceptive to my wisdom. The very next day, I found myself sitting down in an empty classroom. As I took out the materials I had prepared the previous night, I looked over the notes I had already taken one last time. As fellow students trickled in, I found myself hoping that Waldman would have a different disposition from the distasteful Professor Kremp. I had extracted more enjoyment from the readings of chemistry than I expected, and it would be amiss if the attitude of my supposed guiding hand were poor. During my thoughts, I'd almost missed the quiet entrance of Professor Waldman.
The ancient teachers of this science promised impossibilities and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers, whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible, have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature and they show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how blood circulates in the nature of the air we breathe. They've acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. We'll pick up next class with the teachings of Mendeleev.
Today I witnessed a wonder so incredible that I had to put pen to paper and remind myself of reality. The Professor Waldman is beyond description. Today he spoke, and I felt as if my soul was grappling with a palpable enemy. One by one, the various keys were touched, which formed the mechanism of my being. Chord after chord was sounded, and soon my mind filled with one thought, one conception, one purpose. So much has been done, but more, far more will I achieve. Treading in the steps already marked, I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation. Tomorrow I will go visit Waldman, and tomorrow I will forever be changed. There is nothing I'm more sure of.
Good day, Professor. I saw your lecture yesterday and wish to speak with you concerning my future pursuits in natural philosophy, which I find most fascinating. Since my youth, I've chased knowledge, and I believe, no, I know that science is my calling. I've studied Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus with a passion unequaled by any other, I assure you.
Magnus, Paracelsus. These were men whose indefatigable zeal modern philosophers were indebted for most of the foundations of modern knowledge. They had left to us as an easier task to give new names and arrange in connected classifications the facts which they in a great degree had been the instrument of bringing to light. The labors of men of genius, however erroneously directed, scarcely ever fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind.
It is so, Professor. Your lecture removed any lingering prejudice I may have held against modern chemists. I intend to study chemistry and request your advice concerning the books I ought to procure.
I am happy to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your success. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been made and continue to be. It is on that account that I have made it my peculiar study, but at the same time I have not neglected the other branches of science. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attended to the department of human knowledge alone. If your wish really is to become a man of science, and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of philosophy, including mathematics.
Sage advice, sir.
I have here the list of books you requested. Come, let me show you the laboratory.
From that day on, natural philosophy became my entire life. I read with ardor these works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern enquirers have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of men of science of the university. I found even in Kremp a great deal of sound sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In Waldman I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. In a thousand ways he smoothed for me the path of knowledge and made even the most confusing inquiries clear. My application was at first fluctuating and uncertain. It gained strength as I proceeded, and soon became ardent and eager, that the stars often disappeared in the light of the morning while I engaged in my laboratory. My ardor was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. I had often wondered, how did the principle of life proceed? And one night, alone in the laboratory, I saw how the fine form of man degraded and wasted. I beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited all the minutiae of causation, as exemplified in the change from life to death and death to life, until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in upon me. A light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple that I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated. Among the great men of my time, I alone was afforded the opportunity to discover a secret so beautiful and terrible, and I intended to do beautiful and terrible things with it.